Good morning, everybody.
Good morning. Hey, Kathleen.
It's the 6th day of Christmas.
Yes.
I don't know what 6 is. I only know 5 gold rings and 4 robotic birds a calling.
4 robotic birds. 7 lords a leaping.
12. Isn't it 12 lords leaping?
12 lords leaping? I don't know. Somebody will tell us soon what day it is.
That song is like the Goodnight Moon of Christmas songs. But it is December 30th, 2020. Yeah. This is our last episode for the year.
Yes.
So we won't see y'all till 2021. I'm knocking on wood. That's what that sound is. I'm Mark Van Stunik. I direct the Center for Prophetic Imagination.
And I'm Daniel Wolpert. I direct MICA, the Minnesota Institute of Contemplation and Healing.
And Julie's six geese a laying.
6 geese a laying. Okay. See, the robot birds are still with us. They're following us. Yeah. So that's good.
So the 20. This is our retrospective and prospective.
All right. Yeah, and so before we got on, I was telling Mark that this time of year I start putting together stuff. I start thinking about taxes and financial statements and all of that. My favorite thing to think about. And oh yeah, and you know what? Today is Heather's birthday. So happy birthday, Heather.
Happy birthday, Heather.
Yeah. And and so that made me start to see it reminded me of some things that happened early in 2020. And like one of the things that happened was we had this big 60th birthday party for Deborah, my wife. And we had this band and we danced and it was like super fun. And, our kids flew here and Deborah's sisters flew here. And I was thinking, oh my God, that feels like 300 years ago.
In the time before.
Yes, before times.
In the land before time, but instead of with cool dinosaurs, it's
and then I was as we've transitioned this to also being a podcast. I was looking back through episodes, and right, if you go back to episodes it's like 1 through 10 or 1 through 6 or 7, we're sitting together in a room. We're trying to be a little far apart, but the camera can't quite get both of us. So, we keep sort of leaning in and then we gave that up and, so it has been, and I was remembering about, I do remember New Year's Eve last year, right? People had these 2020 glasses, right? And that was the joke, like, oh, this year it's 2020 vision. That's so great, and in a lot of ways, 2020 started off pretty good. And
as much as it could in the Trump administration.
That's right.
But that back then, it was like the Trump administration is almost done. We're in the final stretch.
Right. Exactly. Things are going to get better. And man, we had no idea what was coming. We just had no idea.
And we don't know what's coming.
We still have no idea. So then turning around and looking forward, I've been sort of imagining, because people are talking, oh, the pandemic's going to be over. We've been talking about that since it started, right? And so I've been trying to imagine, right? Like, so what is it going to feel like, going and doing all these things with people without masks? I mean, one presumes at some point that'll happen. I don't know. It may not be till 2022, but at some point that'll happen. I'm realizing how how strange that will feel at this point. That, I've been doing this other thing now for what feels like years. And I'm so acclimatized to it. And it's going to be really odd. Like Deborah and I were saying the other night, we're talking about dishes, and we're like, gee, are we ever going to like use all these plates again? Are we ever going to have,
Yep. You
number
only
of
need two
people
plates
over? Yeah, you only need two plates. Like, and yeah, so all of that just makes me realize, what kind of alternate reality we've been put into, and how traumatic and stressful. And then, and for me, living 2 blocks from where George Floyd was killed, I mean, that's still a huge part of my reality. Not quite on a daily basis, but just about on a daily basis. I mean, we had another shooting up there on Sunday. We're constantly getting all kinds of weird stuff going on. There's a lot of issues about, what is going to happen there. And, the city is being as dysfunctional as ever in terms of trying to work that out with people. And and so that obviously has been an enormous part of this year, all of the uprisings related to that. And yeah, so man, it's been something else. It's been something else.
And and remember in the early times. So we were talking about this whole podcast, vidcast, whatever, started as an exploration of the pandemic as an apocalyptic moment, meaning not the end of the world, but something being unveiled in such a way that it gave us the opportunity to create a new world. That's, to me, what the heart of the apocalyptic spiritual tradition is about. This sort of rupture. And there was all sorts of talk like, oh, look, it's gotten like the sky is cleaner, and we're going to learn the values of mutual aid and all those sorts of things. I don't think that has happened in any measurable way. And in fact, like, yes, clean air, but that's gone back to normal. And now we've got billions of masks floating in the ocean, right? So,
Right.
This is where, to me, the pivot to 2021 is, did we learn our lessons? I'm sure there are some people, and I have enough faith that a small handful of people who are discerning can affect great change. But systemically speaking, I'm actually kind of worried because this back to normal, like, I don't want to give any credence to the weird right-wing idea that somehow this mask thing was like a plot from the government to get us to be subjugated. comma, but there is this part of the side effect is that our new normal is going to be lower than our old normal. When we go back to normal, we settle for less.
Yeah.
Right? Because it's been so shitty. As long as it's in the ballpark of the old normal, we'll be okay. And so this is what happens incrementally. We've seen this, like, you see memes like this all the time. Like, yes, my father was able to provide for an entire family and get a pension off of one paycheck without a high school diploma, making like not a lot of money, but it was still a lot of money in those times. And now 2 incomes that are for people who have college degrees don't even equal that. Right. So we've seen this incremental decline that is so incremental that these old timers sometimes think, well, I don't even understand what the hell you're talking about. I was able to put myself through college, like packing, working the meat plant on weekends and in the summers. So we're seeing that kind of happen now, like this degrading of expectations in a time when we should be coming out of the gates fighting. And I think part of this is the Biden effect. So this is how I straddle this time between times. I tend to look at the negative. I have all kinds of reasons for that. But this is one of my areas of pessimism because I know how human beings can be when it comes to expectations.
So we'll have some more to say about that, but we've got some
Comments coming
comments coming in, so I want to throw that up.
Kathleen, I feel horrible today. My nephew, who has been making a living by arm wrestling.
I'm sorry.
If you don't write like short stories based upon your experiences or some sort of memoir, I'll be disappointed, Kathleen, because you've got all these fascinating figures and experiences. A nephew makes money by arm wrestling. All I can think about is the movie Over the Top with Sylvester Stallone.
Right. Yep.
Which actually, anyways, he got injured, which is actually sad. Is now living in his car.
No, I mean, this is sad, so I'm sorry to laugh, but it just
the premise starts funny, and then
yes,
he wants to move in with me and his girlfriend and their kids. They don't wear masks, and so I won't take them, but I feel guilty. Oh my God, that's such a bad situation to have to be in, and it's not it's not your fault. You have to maintain your boundaries, but I understand that guilt.
Yeah, no, that's really sad. No,
sorry to hear that. CK writes, hindsight is not 2021.
That's for sure. Yeah.
I can't wait for 2020 to be in my rearview mirror, though, for sure. Gus wrote, I've been feeling anxiety lately when I watch TV and people are within 6 feet, and those people aren't wearing masks. Why isn't she wearing a goddamn mask?
Yeah. Gus, I've really been noticing that too. The longer this goes on, when I watch movies and TV shows, it feels really strange. Mm-hmm. And it almost sort of gets in the way of engaging with the movie, because I just keep thinking, like, what reality are those people living in? It's obviously not the pandemic. So so it's just an interesting.
Juice writes, settling for less in which way? In the light of climate change, etc., it seems we must at some point accept settling for less. That's a good point. I'm not talking about settling for less, meaning like, hey, we should expect more stuff. And we talked about minimalism yesterday, and we could factor that conversation in. But the issue to me is settling for less when it comes to justice.
Right.
Settling for less when it comes to healthcare for all. Things that are actually would bring equity to society. At the same time, I think people are going to expect, there's this weird correlation in our society that is part of the way we're gamed, where we're told you can't complain about your lot in life because look at how much stuff you have. And so I think cheap stuff becomes more plentiful the more American middle class people slide down the pole a little bit. And so I don't want
so settling for less in terms of justice. I mean, that's another way of looking at it. Settling for less in terms of a society that cares about people. Just chipping away at all of that. We've got a couple of supportive comments that may be nice to throw up there.
Says, so sorry, Kathleen. Susan writes, Kathleen, you have had a more traumatic year than most of us. I feel for you. Yeah. It's hard. And you have, you seem to have been hit by a lot because of your work and your family. And so I'm sorry to hear that.
So we're thinking about you. And we're glad that you're with us in this.
Susan writes, I'm clinging to the hope that this can and will be a moment of shifting of our collective priorities where climate change is concerned. I hope so. To me, it seems like if it's going to be, we have, those of us who are aware of this and care about it have to push. And this is the thing, like, that's asking a lot. Let's be honest here. We've had a crap year. We're all tired. People who struggle for justice are even more tired because a lot of us were going through the pandemic and engaged in stuff like George Floyd and engaged in campaign stuff and like activists and people who work for justice, like as whether it's part of their job or recreational, I guess, we usually have to do it on top of everything else. So like regular people, if we're going to use that term, people that maybe don't seem to be engaged can just do their life, but then a lot of us have to do our life plus. And so asking us to somehow put more energy in this crucial time when we're so fatigued, that's not fair. It really isn't. But there's no alternative, really. We have to push.
Well, and so just to tag on what you were saying about looking at the negative. I mean, one of the things that I've really been noticing in the last few weeks, in particular, as we're rocketing towards New Year's, is all these things where people are saying, "Oh, I'm so excited! It's gonna, 2020 is gonna be over. Let's throw it in the trash can. It's been the worst year. 2021 is gonna be so much better. It's gonna be great." And I'm like, I wish that I could say that unequivocally and feel great about that. I don't think we can assume that, right? I mean, 2020 at least seemingly started off kind of okay. I mean, 2021, could begin with an attempted coup, right? I mean, if the Democrats actually win the two Georgia elections, which it seems possible that they will, now not only will Trump be a loser and be trying to overthrow the election, but that means Mitch McConnell will have lost too. And so now, and we all know what a total slime bucket he is, he's now going to be motivated to also overturn the election. And so, a week from now, things could be really, really bad as a way of starting off this year. And, and one of the things that I've been thinking a lot about is this article that I read a couple of years ago by the last Western or American journalist to leave Venezuela. And I think I may have mentioned this article early on in the pandemic. And she was talking about her time there and how things just kept getting worse and worse and worse. And how she noticed herself thinking, after some new horrible thing would happen, thinking to herself, okay, now it's going to get better. And the end of the article, she said, one of the things I learned is that things don't necessarily get better, and that things actually can always get worse. So the article ended on this very pessimistic note, which is really hard. And I know we've mentioned this before, right? If you think about the plagues of the Middle Ages, they went on for hundreds of years, off and on. Somebody was just mentioning to me the other day the pandemic of 1918. The flu came back like 4 times before it really went away. So I understand the desire to just say, "Oh, this one bad year. Now we're on the uphill swing." But I also feel the need to be very realistic about this personally and to say, yeah, I'm not really sure that that's true. And so, these activities of spiritual life, of spiritual community, of really resisting this idea of, oh yeah, let's just, go back to normal. That's maybe not the best approach. And I think that we, to really continue to engage these practices that are going to really help us for the long haul, and for some serious transformation in the long haul, I think we need to keep doing that.
Just comments are coming in, but I just want to say something quick. I want to talk about hope. Dan jokes about this on air a lot. I'm a pessimistic guy. It's partly because of trauma, but also my mystical experiences I've had have been linked to suffering. So I'm hyper attuned to where I see suffering. It's getting bad. And so I work through affliction, and that's how I encounter God. Now, because of that, I have this leaning towards naming every form of oppression and pushing, and that's driven me towards anarchism. And one of the areas that anarchism is strong in is in this resistance of abstraction. So when we say, I hope 2021 is better, often what we mean is I hope things out there get better, and it wafts onto me in a good way. But an anarchist sort of perspective, not exclusively, but part of what the strength of an anarchist perspective is saying, I hope that the community that we are able to create together can accomplish good things for us all. And so to me, the hope I want to encourage everyone listening and watching to have is the hope that comes from mutual aid and community and from building it. Yes, we can have some sort of like optimism. Maybe things could get better out there, but that's a naive hope. Mm-hmm. A realistic hope is the hope that a community has when they discern the spirit moving in their midst, in their actions, and create support for one another, which is a lot of freaking work. Like Dan and I have spent a large portion of our adult lives exploring this idea, and honestly, I'm not any closer to it than I have been. Like at any point, like I'm kind of in a weird way. Like I'm the kind of person you'd invite to have be the expert talking about intentional community. I have no freaking clue about how to create strong, sturdy mutual aid. It's a work in progress, but that's still where my hope lies.
Yeah, and what you describe, I mean, that's the same thing with the spiritual life perspective. You know, the hope comes from us engaging in our life of practice. That's where the hope comes from. The hope doesn't come from, oh, Caesar is going to get nicer tomorrow. there was no
a new
hope.
Caesar will be better.
Yeah, a new Caesar will be better.
Now that we're done with Nero, hopefully this Caligula guy will be great.
Yeah, right.
Or whatever.
Right.
Adam, right?
Genghis's cousin is going to be a nicer Khan.
I mean, Kubla, his grandson, seemed nice. All things considered. Adam writes, so we had an idea of the new normal shoved in our heads all this time that any change is going to be a huge relief. Biden is the perfect example gauge for this. Yeah, he's a barometer of like how much we're willing to settle.
Right.
If we didn't have Trump, Biden would be one of the most lackluster. It would be kind of just an entirely underwhelming. The only charge of joy he brings is because he's not Trump. And let's be honest, that's really it. Susan writes, in this current season of Shameless, the cast is wearing masks, which I find a fascinating decision by directors.
Yeah, cool.
I didn't know that. That's good. Heather writes, freedom now means the right to buy what you want. Oh, my God. That's exactly right. Yeah. Like, that just shows how flimsy the American idea of freedom is, which is even more pathetic because that's the central animating spirit of the American way of life is this thing we call freedom. But that's all that we mean by it. Ceres writes, countries use stuff to silence their citizens on their abuse.
Yeah.
Adam writes, just like how I remind myself that it's not the world I hate, but capitalist colonialist imperialism, it's not human nature to fall into these traps. It's the way people are conditioned under these systems. We can't forget how powerful and pervasive media, messaging, and marketing are. Yeah, we're herded cattle. We're managed humanity.
Yeah.
And so like our worst instincts can get gamed towards like horrible ends.
Yeah, I would want to push back a little bit on this human nature thing. I don't know if I want to spend a lot of time on this, but I mean, human beings create these systems. They don't appear magically out of nowhere. And so I would say this is an aspect of human nature. But yeah, certainly once the systems are rolling and you wake up in one of them, that is what is forming you for sure.
Yeah, because then there's a center of gravity and it takes a lot of strength to break out of it. So you're not choosing. Most of us don't get to choose.
No.
So, but it is like powerful. The choices of powerful people in the past are inflicted upon us today as normal. And that's a shitty situation. Ceres writes, other countries are able to address both climate change and pandemic, but the United States keeps, for the lack of a better word, cock blocks their efforts.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and it is very interesting how and this fits so much with the Christmas message, right? We've mentioned Mary's song a lot, the lowly being lifted up and the powerful being brought down. I mean, we have noticed over the last number of years that some of the least powerful countries in the world are talking about and doing the most in relation to climate change. Now, some of the least powerful countries in the world have done the best in terms of the pandemic. I don't think this is a coincidence because, in the most powerful countries, you have the most toxic weight of this particular form of globalized industrialism that is pressing against working on any of these problems.
Susan writes, I was reading an article recently put forth on Civil Eats page that talked about our diet being a huge contributor to global warming. A shift to plant-based diet will be as crucial as burning less fossil fuel.
Oh yeah.
I think plant-based or at least sustainable, the kind of, I have enough friends who raise cattle, but they do it in the Catholic worker way, where there's kind of an ecosystem. But yeah, industrialized meat production is just shit. It's really not helping anything. And
well, and it's also a quantity issue. I mean, if everybody in the world ate as much meat as Americans do,
oh my God, we'd be dead by all be dead by now.
Yeah, we'd all be dead by now, pretty much. I mean, it would just trash the ecosystem at a rate far greater than it's being trashed now.
It's funny to talking to. There's different kinds of leftists, and so there's the leftists who are like, great, we can now raise meat in a petri dish, and this will be great for the great glorious revolution. So I feel like Marxists who are more science-minded think that way, and then you get these anarcho-primitivists who are saying this is the end, we're all going to die. So but this is another example of like, it's kind of cool. Like we can make these alternative meats that you grow. I don't know what the downsides are. I'd have no problem eating a like petri dish burger. But some people, somehow it becomes this thing, like they attach their masculinity to bacon. Like there's this whole trend, like unless you like if you take away your bacon, like Obama taking away their guns. Like there's all these symbolic weight given to meat that's just this disgusting and tied totally with toxic masculinity, and proof positive that capitalism and patriarchy are intertwined. Adam writes, the only thing I remember about Over the Top, which is this Sly Stallone film, is Sly turning his hat backwards as his switch to turn on arm wrestling. Then he'd do this thing called Over the Top where he'd put his hand over the guy's thumb. That's what Over the Top is. And that's that's when he went into third gear. So great film, 80s Americana. Yeah. Such a dumb but great arm wrestling. Gus writes, Susan, Netflix has a comedy, haven't seen it, called Social Distance. That's a comedy built around family doing family via Zoom. Looks Arrested Development-ish.
Yeah.
Michelle writes, not to Neil deGrasse Tyson, everyone's New Year. I've never heard that used as a verb. But arbitrary. Things aren't going to change just because you tossed your calendar. It's time to work. Not just rest on our laurels because something isn't as bad as it was 15 seconds ago.
Right. Yeah. So of course, all of these delineations are arbitrary, but they do take on kind of a psychic life of their own.
Sure.
Yeah, which is interesting.
Adam writes, I was so leery of what 2020 would bring. Our problems are not confined to this year. That feels like a whole other marketing concept to make us feel like these problems have a time limit. It's again echoing the same sentiment. Elizabeth writes, people keep telling me Trump is done, but I'm not willing to breathe freely until he's out. And that's only a partial breath because there are too many Trump followers that will also feel this loss personally. Yeah, and he'll still be some sort of weird shadow leader for a lot of these folks until he's dead. And then there might be another.
Yeah, I mean, maybe, there was an interesting thing that I read the other day of somebody saying that, once he's out and, not everybody has to pay attention to him all the time, he may fade more quickly than people think. I don't know. We'll find out. But first we have to get him out, which
it's not a foregone conclusion.
It's not a done deal yet.
Ceres writes, I think we need to focus on how do good and joy without expecting for justice to win necessarily. Like, this is the thing. And here CK is also saying this. I got to say my family's healthy, I'm alive, and I have love, and I'm loved. To me, this is a part of the community piece, like why community, mutual aid is the place from which to do resistance. Like, I know what it's like. I have anxiety and depression, and I can feel really lonely. And if I try to operate from that place of loneliness and a sense of forsakenness and despair, it's hard. There's no joy in the struggle when you're doing that. But communities, like I've seen healthy communities that when their struggle is also, it's flowing out of their joy and actually even animates some of their joy.
Yeah.
So having people we love remembering that, marinating in that, and letting that be the place from which we do our work, that's where the magic's at.
Yeah, and and I talk about this all the time in my activist circles. You have to celebrate your wins. You have to have fun.
Sense of humor.
You have to celebrate. Yeah, you have to make
sometimes the worst sense of humor when we get serious.
Yeah, you have to make bad jokes. I mean, yeah, if you can't do that, well, first of all, it's questionable what place your activism is coming out of anyway. But two, you're just going to burn out and be miserable. And so, yeah, I mean, when you got a good moment, you got to be like, hey, that was great. That was a win. I mean, I've been doing activist stuff for, going on close to 50 years now. There aren't a lot of wins.
Longer than most of you have been alive.
That's right. There aren't a lot of wins. So when you have a win, you've got to be like, woohoo, and people's tendency is to just go right to like the next thing and the next problem. And it's like, man, you got to at least stop and have a party. So.
No, and that's the thing. Like people want to fixate, like if we stop and enjoy it, then we'll just kind of like lay down and give up. And so we have this instinct of thinking that really activism has to be fueled by rage and outrage, which that's part of it for sure.
Part of it.
But it's not sustainable.
No.
Like this is where every great revolutionary, like I know people don't always like these figures like Che Guevara. Che Guevara said a revolutionary does revolution out of love. Like you might not like the guy, but that's a pretty wise statement. It has to come from a place of love ultimately for it to be sustainable.
I think Jesus said that too.
Dorinda writes, it feels like each of us will pick our square on the game board. Denial, survival, guilt, fake gratitude, determination to build better justice, stuck in grief. I'm sure there are more squares, but I don't think we'll stay in our squares permanently.
That's good. I like that. Yeah, got to jump around the squares.
Chess. Adam writes, when people talk about when all this is over and whatnot in regards to the pandemic, I always consider that there's really no guarantee that this will end at all. I'm not planning events 3 months from now. I'm dealing with where we're at now and how to move and live through this.
Yes. Yeah, it's a very important point. Everybody's acting like we got this vaccine, it's over. It's like, that's not true. That's not true at all. First of all, the vaccine has to work. Second of all, lots of people have to get it. Third of all, the virus has to not mutate into something that can get around the vaccine. And third of all, maybe there's a new illness that pops up out of someplace somewhere. So, being much more in the present is much healthier.
Plus, there's all these after effects that are not.
Yeah, and then the after effects,
not diseases themselves, but are caused by this. Economic, ecological, political. Adam writes, hope, like prayer, comes from action, communication, and care as a verb. It's like that DC Talk song, Love is a Verb. A little evangelical Christian music for you. Elizabeth writes, it's one day and one act at a time, Mark. Yeah, it's hard to plan. Like we've had to plan because, we run organizations that have to do things, but it's a lot harder to plan with any sort of confidence.
Yes, it is. Still in the planning gray zone.
Yeah, Adam writes, these are white Western systems. There are other systems. Yeah, unfortunately, we're kind of really locked into this one, and we need to change that. Adam writes, saying it's human nature ignores other ways of living that really are the antithesis to these systems of control and manipulation. Yeah, and we should have a conversation about human nature sometimes, because this system that we're in now is not a foregone conclusion. We could have done. There's better ways of doing that we could have done, and the reasons we're like this is why we have critiques of capitalism, patriarchy, all these things. Not every system has been capitalistic or patriarchal or whatever. So, whole other conversation worth having.
Yeah.
Bacon and masculinity. No. I think everybody likes bacon is masculine.
Julia, I was confused about that too. I don't know.
You don't see people like, it's like when someone is eating a salad and they're like, huh, I need to have steak on that or slam some bacon on there. There's this way of kind of culinary posturing that is tied into people's masculinity. You see it with meat products all the time and shaming of people who don't eat meat. So a lot of anti-vegetarian statements. I mean, I don't know. I have too many carnivorous anti-vegetarian friends. So it's totally a thing. If you don't experience it, I'm glad for you, but it's a thing. Patricia writes, industrialized animal production is a huge risk for future pandemics as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. Jeremy writes, I personally wrestle with whether more change comes from working within the system to change it or from attempting to disengage from the existing system and build something new. Can hope be found in both? I mean, there's a tension between this is the prefigurative politics kind of thing where you create the system you want to see. Then there's organizing towards reform and there's organizing towards revolution. Yeah. I feel like you need to have all those pieces, but the problem is, seems like if there's any energy, 95% of it goes towards reforming from within. And to me, that's kind of a problem. That's kind of how I define it.
Yeah, and ultimately, this starts to become a discernment question, right, for each person. We're all, we all find different paths that are life-giving and helpful. And I would say that unless you leave planet Earth, there is no way of disengaging from any system fully. And so we just occupy different positions relative to the whole system that is the planet. And we need to discern and find our way as to what really seems to be the most helpful and seems to be a real calling for us, and then support people that we're around and in community with to do the same.
CK writes, for our family, activism starts at our dinner table and breaking bread. It's at its best, what Christianity was supposed to be like.
Yeah.
It's amazing how this radical, like breaking bread in a certain way can be radical, but we turn it into like a strangely merely symbolic thing. Julia writes, and fourth of all, we need to figure out how to eat and keep a roof overhead for a long while to come.
Yep, absolutely.
Julie writes, 100% for sure there'll be another new illness, for another after that, and another after that, et cetera, et cetera. This is why things like healthcare for all, like, it's bizarre how that got kind of pushed aside as some sort of luxury during all of this.
Right. Yeah.
Juice writes, I think so, although a complete disengagement from existing system can, I think, be very alienating. Yeah, I'm not a big fan of people who make a clean break. Within sort of Anabaptist tendencies, I think that's kind of a problematic way of doing things. But I think kind of embodying stuff in a way that's in conversation with these other modes is important. As for me, I prefer a middle way, changing the system from the inside, but still in a radical way. Again, bacon. I didn't say that women don't like bacon. It's not that men are always going to be carnivores. It's just that if someone walks in a room and shames someone for eating a salad and says something about bacon or meat, they're disproportionately going to be a dude. So
that's totally not true, Mark. This is a pumpkin spice thing. It's
I'm not making it up.
Making it up.
This is totally a thing. Feel free to email in your messages about how certain forms of toxic masculinity fixate on meat.
On bacon.
Yeah.
Julia's big masculine hunkin' dog is going to bite you now.
Rochelle writes, there's a weird balance between recognizing that living too much in the future is a delusion and recognizing that you do need to plan and anticipate.
Yeah.
It's hard.
Well, absolutely. And, to me, and I think this is one of the things that has created this weird time distortion during the pandemic. I mean, our ability to plan for the future has been radically changed. And that's, and that has really been very, very challenging, continues to be very, very challenging. And has really thrown us for a loop. So, yeah, absolutely.
Adam writes, I've always believed that we need people committed to change on the whole spectrum of life, experiencing within and without the system. The truth is we don't have a choice but to do otherwise. We do have the choice to accept it or not, to challenge and engage folks on either side and hold people accountable. Yeah, we're in the system whether we like it or not. So we have to leverage what we can. And like Dan said, it's a discernment question. I think what both Dan and I I'm just going to speak for you, Dan. I think what we'd probably both say is we need to bring more imagination, mutual aid community into the mix. Because I'm okay with the idea of reform. I just have seen what people mean by reform, and it's not impressive.
No,
it doesn't mean that reform can't be impressive. We've had some amazing reform movements in the past, but this is where it needs to be infused with some revolutionary spirit. But I've also seen people try to do the prefigurative, like we're going to do our own thing here. And a lot of this stuff has just kind of reached a dead end, and we need to be bold and think of new things and discern. Dad, is this a quote from something? I don't know. Dad, you can't eat all the bacon. Who's with me? Boycott Dad. Boycott Dad. I don't know. The meeting thing. The meat-eating man is a thing, y'all. Adam just went up 4 points on my friend ranking list for agreeing with me.
Do you put pumpkin spice on your bacon?
I mean, you can maple glaze bacon, so why not add pumpkin spice? Why not?
There we go.
Maple and pumpkin spice go together like peanut butter and bacon, really. Julia writes, is indeed a question of discernment. Can I change the system by standing outside and shouting at it, or do I need to burrow under the wall and then act to subvert the dominant paradigm? Discernment. I think there was probably a picture here from Ellen. There's no blank on this page.
This is nothing.
We're getting more comments coming in, but we're way past time. So I'm just going to blaze through these last three and then be done.
People have gone off the rails.
Adam writes, imagination. This is my issue right now. I've been saying for years that we need to revolutionize the revolution.
Revolution. Yeah.
Agreed. Patricia writes, Dr. Eddie Gout in his talk through Westminster said the thing most needed was imagination. And then Adam says pumpkin spice for women. I don't think Adam's saying that. I think he's saying that's what the culture. This is why one of the reasons pumpkin spice has become a thing is because it's associated with the basic woman. Oh, here we go. Yeah. That quote is an imagined bit of dialogue where activism starts at the dinner table. Thank you for drawing us into your imagination, Adam.
And we're breaking bread, eating bacon covered with pumpkin spice, and boycotting things.
This whole conversation
and then just imagine all of that.
I'm sorry for bringing.
We gotta stop.
I'm sorry for bringing up bacon. It was just a side comment, and it's drawn a lot of ire and attention. The meat-eating man is kind of hilarious in Orthodox circles when Lenten seasons hit. Guys don't know how to eat, so they end up gaining 20 pounds during a fasting time since they only eat carbs for 2 I had a housemate who ate potato chips and baked potatoes the entire Orthodox Lent, and because he couldn't figure it out.
So because of this, I need to close with one of my favorite religious jokes.
Go for it.
And we're not going to read any more comments. Perfect closing. So this Baptist guy moves into a Catholic neighborhood, and the first Friday of Lent, he's barbecuing a steak on his grill. And all the Catholic guys are upset about this because they're jealous. And they say, well, we got to make this guy a Catholic. Mm-hmm. And so they make him, he goes to catechism, and then when he gets baptized or converted as a Catholic, the priest shakes holy water on him and says, you were born a Baptist, you were raised a Baptist, but now you are a Catholic. So they think, great, everything's fine. Next year, first Friday of Lent rolls around, the guy's outside barbecuing a steak. And the Catholic guys are all pissed, and they're like, well, maybe he didn't understand us. So they all go to the fence, and they look over the fence, and there's this guy standing over his barbecue, shaking water on the steak, going, you were born a cow, you were raised a cow, but now you are a fish. And with that, love you all.
See you in 2021.
Bye.